Jerry, are you there? Hold on, I'm going to put you in touch with someone who has some suggestions about the banner, and I want you to say yay or nay. Okay?
Hi, Jerry. Hi, would it work to put 2 chairs behind the 2 chairs there and then hang the banner like right about where I'm standing? Yeah. Oh, the World Without Walls banner. Gotcha. Okay. It is.
So I think we have lots of. So I think I'll put these ones for the aesthetics. And like it's also welcome to just sit here or maybe we might start.
How are you? Yeah. After I saw you, I started crying. So not 100%. We raised like 8,000. Big, yeah. Yeah. But yeah, it was so good. Like 8,000.
When you did this, I was like, oh.
And I was supposed to go to Florida, but it's something you can change. And I came back here because we figure out what we are going to do. No, it was before the situation. And after coming here, after the situation, we changed everything again. I don't know what we're going to do. Now, what is happening is affecting everyone. Because, it's like a war. It's a war. And, the people in the village, they are afraid. And I'm afraid of them that they're going to do anything. Anymore. They can come out from the settlement and under the cover of the army and the police and everything. And they will help them to do that. Yes, of course. And they blocked all the roads, they blocked all the entries for all the Palestinian community. We can't move, we can't do anything else. So it's so hard. And I have been contacting them all the time and hearing what they are suffering of. They can't go like to buy their groceries, to buy some food or anything. So yeah. The next day that we saw you, we took him to the airport. Yeah, and he stayed in Turkey for a few days, maybe 4 or 5 days, and then he went back. In November, the 5th of November. Yeah. This is what I was planning to do. But after this, I don't know. And it's even harder. I can't go back home. If I'm going back home, I'll get stuck in Jordan for a while. No way. Even if I will enter the borders and if it's like Palestine, there's no transportation, no movement, and nothing. So I don't know what. So I decided just to move because I don't know. At least like 2 weeks to see what I can do. It's not easy.
It's a long time.
I want to go for high. Okay.
Okay, fabulous. All right. All right, bye. All right, good evening to all. I want to invite you to take your seats. It's good to have you all here tonight. We are gathered to lift up a light for Gaza. We are gathered to come together to hear from Yousef Aljamal, a Gazan author and Palestinian refugee who writes about Palestinians living in the diaspora, borders and barriers to movement and struggles for liberation. We are delighted to have you with us, Yousef. I welcome both those of you who are in the sanctuary and those of you on live stream. I know we have probably twice as many, probably as many people online as in person at this moment, so we're quite a crowd who wants to hear what you have to say. I want to recognize as we gather that tonight's event really is a convergence of a few different things, and I just want to name that going into it. I want to recognize that Yousef has been on book tour for the past 2 weeks, and I imagine it's been quite a 2 weeks. Some very exciting things happened in the past 2 weeks. I won't mention them, but I know some exciting things happened.
Yes.
And some horrific things have happened. I'm glad you're here, and what better time to just be quiet and listen to your experiences, your perspectives, your wisdom in this time. I recognize that this is also a World Without Walls event. In the Bay Area, a variety of organizations, many of whom sponsored this event, come together around this time every year. Usually it's around November 9th, the day of the fall of the Berlin Wall, where we celebrate our work for, our hope for, our longing for, and our conviction that one day we will live in a world without walls. We know that walls can come down, and we are about the work of bringing them down. And then finally, in the midst of what's happening not only internationally, but nationally, what's happening by way of what the United States government is doing to perpetuate violence in Gaza, we're here to remember that we have a role to play, that we have a responsibility to act, and that if we decry violence, we must do absolutely everything we can to ensure violence will end. Thank you for being here to be on this journey together as we move in that direction. Some of you don't know me. I go by many names. I'm Pastor Allison here in this congregation. I'm pastor of Public Witness. I'm the convener of the Bay Area World Without Walls Coalition, and I am the national organizer for the Apartheid-Free Communities Initiative. I would love to talk to you more about that afterward. What all that means is that I get to be the moderator. And so I don't want to spend a lot of time on introductions, but I'm really glad you're here. I'm glad we're all here from all our different facets of life and understanding. We're here with heavy hearts, and we're here to listen. Thank you to the World Without Walls hosts. If you're part of the World Without Walls Coalition or are a sponsoring org, could you just raise your hand? Thank you to each of you and the ways in which we are linking our intersectional struggles for a world without walls. And I do want to invite Dove Baum of American Friends Service Committee, who is hosting the book tour. She is also my supervisor, to come up and greet you from American Friends Service Committee.
Thank you, everybody, for coming today. This is a hard time for many of us. I know we are all glued to the news these days with horror and with fear, mourning for the thousands who were killed and hoping to be able to stop the genocidal catastrophe that is looming over our heads. This is the best time, I think, to come here and hear more about life in Gaza and remember the lives of actual real people in Gaza that are so devalued these days, even by American politicians and the US president. I want to invite us to just start by taking a moment of silence to think about all of these lives and what we are willing to do to protect them. Thank you so much. My colleagues in the American Friends Service Committee have helped produce this book already last year, and I recommend reading it. I also recommend going on the American Friends Service Committee, afsc.org website to our Take Action page. There is a petition to Congress that you can sign, and tomorrow we will have a new action alert that calls for end of all hostilities, as well as opening a humanitarian corridor to try and save lives as much as possible. There are many other action alerts. Use all of them. Call Congress. Try and influence whoever you can, because I'm sure everybody here feels just like me the extent of this catastrophe that is happening right now. I don't really have much more to say. We're all here to listen to Yousef, and I want us to all welcome him.
Yousef, before we start our conversation, in recognition that this is a sacred conversation, this is not a political debate, this is a time of listening and learning and talking together. I wanted to light a candle, a recognition that this book that you are a part of insists that there is indeed light in Gaza, even amid the fires that they endure, and we as a community are holding you in the light. And so may this light that burns as we talk be a reminder of that. All right, so as Dov mentioned, this conversation, the germs of having this evening is to recognize that Yousef is an author of this book, Light in Gaza, and this book itself was written as an acknowledgement that far too often the voices, the truth, the lived reality of Gazans goes unseen, unheard, unspoken, and indeed, non-Gazans have a way of talking non-truths about what happens in Gaza. It seems such a fitting time, because if that is true always, how much more has that been true in the past week? How much more have the voices of Gazans not been heard? I want to acknowledge just these words, the need in the introduction written by Jihad Abu Salam. The need for a serious, meaningful, and informed conversation about Gaza and the entirety of the Palestinian question beyond the existing cliches, stereotypes, slogans, and ridiculous political processes and frameworks was never more clear. That is true today. And so let's just begin with me giving you the microphone. Tell us just a little bit about yourself, a little background before we jump into some more weightier questions.
Okay, thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you all for being here today. It's interesting because our speaking tour has been planned in advance before the most recent escalation in Gaza, which shows that it's really, Gaza is still relevant, and Gaza was relevant and will continue to be relevant to the conversation we have. So I grew up in a refugee camp in Gaza called Al-Nusayrat. In Gaza, we have 8 refugee camps. 70% of the population are refugees. In Al-Nusayrat, we have about 120,000 Palestinians who were made refugees in 1948. And they continue to live in the refugee camp. As you know, Gaza is one of the most densely populated places on earth. And I literally grew up in what used to be a British prison during the First World War. I grew up in a place called the Block A, which used to be a prison used by the British during the First World War. So imagine growing up in what used to be a prison in the biggest open-air prison in the world, the Gaza Strip. So the gate to the prison, or what used to be a prison, is the actual gate in and out of the refugee community up until now. So there's one way to get in and out of the refugee community where I grew up, and that's what used to be the actual gate of the prison. So I always grew up with the idea that there is a gate, there is a drone, there is an Israeli patrol unit, that we're not free. We have to go through a gate, a checkpoint, to be able to get in and out. This gate has been a symbol of humiliation for my people, generational humiliation. My grandparents, my parents, my siblings, my nephews and nieces. It's been like this for 75 years. I grew up in Gaza in 2000, in September 2000. I was 11 years old, and just a mile away from Nusayrat in Burej refugee camp, another Palestinian family went through another tragedy when all of you know Muhammad al-Durra. He was my age. He was killed at the age of 11 in his father's lab. In front of the world. So, this tragedy has been going on for generations. When we talk about Nakba, it started in 1947, 1948, but it has been going on since then. So we have to always remember this when we talk about Gaza. And when we think of Gaza today, the history of Gaza, the isolation, fragmentation, siege, military occupation, should always be present when we talk about Gaza and when we remember Gaza. What happens today did not come out of the blue. It's the result of a state policy for decades that aimed to isolate Gaza and cage Palestinians there. Keeping in mind that 70% of them are refugees. So I'll talk more about, personal experiences and stories, and so that you can relate to our experiences. But this is just like a general introduction about Gaza and the situation that is unfolding, the tragedy that is unfolding today.
One of the things that we will do tonight is kind of zoom out big picture and zoom in and see the interconnections between what's happening, a microcosm and macrocosm for Gazans. But I want to begin, your chapter is all about travel restrictions, restrictions of movement that Gazans have felt all too profoundly. Give us a few of your family stories about how travel restriction has really impacted your parents in their marriage and your own experiences getting to know your family.
So as I said, in 1948, my extended family was split into two. Half of the family ended up in the Gaza Strip. The other half ended up in the West Bank. My mom grew up in Bethlehem in the West Bank, in Beit Sahur. My father grew up in Gaza. And for 20 years, when Israel was established, my family suffered from travel restrictions. So when we talk about political division today in Palestine, we should always remember that it's also a geographic division that brought about the political division. So it's a geopolitical division. For 20 years, my extended family, my grandparents, were not able to meet each other because if they needed to do so, they would need to travel to Egypt from Gaza, then Jordan, then meet each other, which was not possible at the time. They ended up in Gaza with nothing. What we know today as the Gaza Strip is a small portion of the Gaza district, the greater Gaza district, that included 34 Palestinian villages that were depopulated in 1948 when Israel was established. So a lot of these people worked in the land as farmers, and all of a sudden, so their source of income was the land, and all of a sudden they lost their source of income and they became refugees in Gaza. Some of them actually live in refugee camps that are a mile away from their original towns and villages that they cannot go back to. They can see it like across the border. So for 20 years, my grandparents suffered from travel restrictions. In 1967, Israel occupied the West Bank and Gaza, like finishing the job, as they call it. And ironically, my extended family was reunited under occupation, military occupation. And they were able to physically meet. And this is how my parents met. My parents come from the same extended family. And in 1978, they got married. So there was a relative period of freedom of movement from 1967 up until 1994. Although we always had, checkpoints, soldiers breaking into our house. I remember this vividly as a child, looking for, children who throw stones at them, as they said, terrifying us. In 1978, my mom moved to Gaza upon marriage, and she changed her address from Bethlehem, Beit Sahur, to Gaza. This is what everyone would do when they move and change their address. She was not aware of the implications of doing that. Like, imagine as an American, you live in San Francisco or anywhere in the US, and then you move to another city, you change your address. It's very normal. It's probably because it's easier to get your water bills or electricity bills, or to get the mail or whatever. But in Palestine, it's a different story, especially if you move from the West Bank to Gaza. So she became a Gaza resident in Israel's eyes. And to explain this to you, we have different types of IDs. So Palestinians from Gaza and the West Bank have the Palestinian Authority ID. But your address on the ID determines how you're treated. So if you're from Gaza, this is like the worst type of IDs a Palestinian could have. And then Palestinians from the West Bank, and then you have Palestinians from Jerusalem who have the Jerusalem ID, and then Palestinians who have Israeli passports who are treated as second-class citizens who have the Israeli ID. So for my mom to visit her hometown, which is an hour away from Gaza, she needed to apply for a permit from 1993 on to see her own family. This was possible up until 2000 when the second Palestinian Intifada broke out. So with the breakout of the Intifada, Israel established a regime of permits, very strict, that was, used to collectively punish Palestinians. For 12 years, my mom was not able to see her family because every time she applies for a permit, Israel would reject her permit. Why? Security threat, or you do not meet the criteria. It's like the same slogan and the same answer. Imagine like being away from your family for 12 years, your family that lives an hour away from you, and you cannot see them, you cannot, like observe them, like if you have nephews and nieces. She was away, she was cut off completely from her family. In 2012, she applied for another permit. So during this time, in 2003, she lost her father. She was not able to participate in the funeral procession. 2008, she lost her mom. She was not able to participate in the funeral procession. Imagine, like, why would a state not allow someone who wants to participate in the funeral procession of their parents? I just do not understand it. Except that, these permits, borders, checkpoints are used to collectively punish us and humiliate us and push us to surrender. When I tell you about my mom, her story is not unique, actually. There are thousands of Palestinian families scattered between Gaza and the West Bank who go through the same experience. Even in 2012, when she applied for a permit, she got a rejection. And then we had to go through an Israeli human rights organization called Gisha that petitioned on her behalf before the Israeli Supreme Court. So imagine, like, to give her a permit, she had to go to the Israeli Supreme Court to get a permit. And they gave her a 4-day permit to see her family. And she overstayed. She violated the terms, and she stayed there for 30 days. We have to, when we talk about Gaza today, we have to always remember the slow death. This I call slow death in Gaza. These, travel restrictions, caging people for decades, for no reason. In 2015, she also needed to go to the West Bank because her eldest brother was dying at a hospital in Jericho. She applied for a permit, and the Israeli military only approved the permit after my uncle passed away. So she was dying in the hospital. She applied for the permit. She provided medical reports that he's very sick, in critical condition, and they only approved the permit after he passed away. She was not even able to participate in the funeral procession. But she still, it's very sad because for Palestinians to get permits, it's a rare chance. So she was still happy that she got the permit because this is the only way for her to see her family. Although she missed the funeral procession, she still traveled. In 2018, she got breast cancer. And we have hundreds of patients, especially cancer patients in Gaza. And because the health infrastructure and hospitals are not equipped with equipments to treat cancer patients, Palestinians in Gaza have to apply for Israeli permits to travel to Jerusalem, mostly to receive medical treatment for cancer. They go to a hospital in Jerusalem called Augusta Victoria. Maybe some of you are familiar with it. And again, they have to go, they are at the mercy of Israel. 19% of Palestinians who get approved to get these permits get them late. There is a very good number of Palestinians who never get these permits and they die in Gaza. There are Palestinians who get permits to have the first chemotherapy session, but not the second one. And again, they are blackmailed to collaborate with Israel in return for getting permits. This is our life. This is before the escalation happened. Yes. And again, as I said, there are hundreds of people who never get these permits for the same reason. In 2007, my sister needed a permit to have a minor surgery, which again was not available in Gaza due to the siege. And she applied for an Israeli permit. She was at the hospital. And she waited for 1 week, and her health situation got really bad. And after a week, she got a rejection. Same reason, security threat. She was working for UNRWA, the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees. She was 26 years old. And the only way for her to get out of Gaza was Egypt. So this is another story for Palestinians. 2% of Palestinians from Gaza travel through Israel. So 98% of Palestinians are not even allowed to apply and travel in the first place. So she applied to travel through Egypt, and the Rafah crossing with Egypt was shut down at the time. And she waited a few more days, and when she made it out of Gaza, she had the surgery in Cairo, but it was too late. The next day, she lost her life. And there are hundreds of people who lost their lives because of this. Not one, not 500, probably like 700 people. So when we think of Gaza today, we have to think of the slow death, the siege, military occupation, humiliation, torture of Palestinians for no reason. Like, why do you prevent Palestinians from having a hospital where they can have access to medical care? Why do you prevent students from having access to education? Like, a lot of students lose their scholarships because of the borders, because they never get, permits. And when this is happening, the word is silent. The word only talks when there is a major escalation, especially when the victims are from the Israeli side, not the Palestinian side. In the past, thousands of people were killed in Gaza. We did not, see the same international outcry. Why? Are we numbers? Is our life less valuable than other people? I'll stop here.
Thank you. This is heartbreaking to hear. Heartbreaking to hear, and yet so important to know. The question when you tell about the inhumane living conditions in which you were forced to endure, your family is separated because of, the question is raised, why all these divisions? And you talk very clearly in your book about the lie of security and how this lie of security is used, but it really is not the main reason for what's happening. Can you say a little bit more both about the lie of security and what's happening?
It's a lie simply because when my mom applied for a permit in 2012 and later, she got a rejection. And when she went through this Israeli human rights organization, she got the permit. So it's not about security, for sure. It's about humiliation, collective humiliation, and pushing people out of their... This is a tool of pressure against Palestinians by fragmenting them in the hope that they will leave. I don't understand why an entire nation is collectively punished, both when they are alive and when they're dead. Like, I might understand, you punish people when they are alive so that they could leave. And that's the purpose. But why would you keep the bodies of hundreds of Palestinians in numbers graveyards, for example? When my sister passed away, my aunt and father were with her, and they tried to bring her body to Gaza twice. So they were at a hospital in Egypt called Al-Arish, 50 miles away from Gaza. They would bring her body back in the ambulance twice to the border, and Israel would send them back. And on the third day, they tried to get back, and they were able to make it. But as they crossed, an Israeli soldier saw my dad, who was crying, and he asked him, "Why do you cry? All of us will die." He told him in Hebrew. My dad speaks Hebrew from his days in Israel, working there as a cheap laborer for many years. It's about a humiliation, because one day my dad was also coming back from his daily job in Israel. He worked at a candles factory. He made all types of beautiful candles used in Jewish holidays. And an Israeli soldier stopped him at the entrance of Block A, where I lived, where my family lives in Gaza. And he asked him to dance. Like, why do you want a Palestinian to dance for you, to entertain you? Except if, the only reason, this is how I understand it, is that they wanted to humiliate my dad in front of other Palestinians, his neighbors, in the area, in the neighborhood. And this was a common tactic, to ask Palestinians to dance, to collect the garbage, to spit on other Palestinians, or to remove a Palestinian flag hang somewhere on the walls. And then if my dad said no, what would happen to him? He knew that if he said no, that he would be, beaten, tortured, probably killed or injured, shot. You never know. It depends on the moods of soldiers, armed to the teeth. So he had to accept, because, and it's, my dad told me this story, and it's also funny at the same time, and I like this sense of black humor that Palestinians have under occupation, that as Palestinian novelist Brahim Nasrallah says, that after all these years under occupation, we are still beautiful, as if we live above occupation, not under it. So we feel like we thrived despite the occupation, not under it. So he said, okay, I can dance for you, but you have to clap for me, How do you dance without having some vibes and music? So they said, okay. They put their guns. He wanted to neutralize their guns. They put their guns aside and they started clapping for him. He picked up his slippers and he ran away. Disappeared in a nearby orange orchard. And he climbed one of the high trees and they kept looking for him and they couldn't find him. But then imagine what happened to his parents, because people in the neighborhood said he was tortured, killed, shot, arrested. He waited there. He hid there, because if he goes back home, then he would be arrested. He waited there until it was sunset time, and my dad has a very beautiful voice. He is into singing, and at the time he used to make the call for a prayer. And he went to a nearby mosque and he made the sunset call for prayers. That was his way of communicating with his parents at the time. They recognized his voice, because at the time we didn't have phones, smart or stupid or anything. So that was his way of communicating with his parents and telling them, hello, I am alive and kicking. So it's about a humiliation, generational humiliation. And it's about supremacy, that these soldiers, 18 years old, they feel that they can get away with, doing that, humiliating Palestinians for no reason. This is the only way I see it.
Another question about Gaza. One of the more inspiring experiences of Gaza recently in 2021 was the March of Return. And first of all, I know it was very specifically called the March of Return, not the March Against the Blockade, not the March Against Occupation. So say a little bit more about what the March of Return is and how it represented, in many ways, the collective spirit of Gazans.
I have a friend in Gaza. He's 90 years old. His name is Ahmed Al-Hajj. And he became a refugee at the age of 16 from Sawafir. So it's one of the villages in the greater Gaza area. He was educated. He spoke English even back in 1948. He was politically active. And all of a sudden, he had to leave the village. And they ended up in Al-Fallujah village, which was under Egyptian control at the time. They were under siege for 5 months. So his mom told him, listen, Ahmed, you are the only educated person in our family. I want you to carry the legacy of our family. So please try to get out of here. So he had to crawl on the ground in the mud in October 1948, and he made it to Gaza. It was very risky because snipers were all over the place. And I'm telling you this story because Ahmed Al-Hajj today, 90 years old, he's still as sharp as he was in 1948. He still lives in a rental house. He refuses to purchase land and buy and build a house in Gaza because for him Gaza is a refugee camp. It's not his home. And we have to, and I mean, there are a lot of Palestinians, including my family, who chose to purchase land in Gaza. And not, in my family's case, they still live in the refugee camp, but to build a new house. In his case, he refused to accept his refugee status, and this was his way of rejecting these terms, that I don't want to become a refugee forever. It's very symbolic, but it's also very telling, and it's telling of how many people in Palestine, especially in refugee camps, and in Gaza think. 70% of Gaza's population are refugees. As I said, the majority of them live literally across the border from what used to be their towns and villages. So the people of Gaza have tried everything in the past. They tried peaceful protests. They tried armed resistance. They tried strikes during the first Intifada. They stopped paying taxes. They tried protests, but nothing worked. So to center the narrative and discourse around the question of Palestinian refugees, and when we talk about the Great March of Return, so if Palestinians can return back to, especially Palestinian refugees, to their towns and villages, it means that the siege is over. The siege is just one like story of a series of stories and like tragedies and restrictions imposed on Palestinians. The most important question for Palestinians is the question of Palestinian refugees. And this is not strange coming from a community where 70% of the people are refugees. Why is it strange when refugees want to go back home? They literally, across the border, see their towns and villages where Israeli settlers enjoy water, electricity 24/7. They have, paved, they have infrastructure, roads, beautiful houses built on their lands, while these people live in misery and poverty in refugee camps for 75 years. So people mobilized at the border. They built tents in order to draw the attention of the world to their plight. This is the main question they told the world. It's about refugees, a question of Palestinian refugees. And the same as Ahmed Al-Hajj still lives in a rental house, many refugees in Gaza think that the refugee camps are rental houses. They don't want to settle there forever. And again, the Great March of Return also drew the attention that when we talk about Palestine, it's not only Gaza. Gaza is a small portion of Palestine. It's 1.3% of historic Palestine. So the Great March of Return was also about Palestinians in the diaspora, Palestinians in refugee camps in Jordan and Lebanon and Syria and Egypt. It's about Palestinians in Chile, Honduras, and Colombia too. It's about every single Palestinian, that we are one nation, we are scattered everywhere. And without addressing the question of Palestinian refugees, the plight of the Palestinian people will continue.
Say a little bit more about the young people of Gaza who have left the area, as is so common in impoverished communities and colonized places, that young people want to leave so that they can have opportunity and what that leaves behind. And yet I've heard that you have a very interesting understanding of how that plays out with Gazans.
So almost 50% of people in Gaza are under 20. So we have a very young population. But this young population, and over the years, they saw the shrinking land of Gaza taking place in front of their eyes. Israel imposed a new, what they call them, مناطق عازلة, buffer zones. To the east, fishermen cannot fish at more than 3 or 6 nautical miles. This is the norm in Gaza. This is normal, okay? This is not war. Fishermen are shot at. Their boats are confiscated. Some of them get injured or killed or arrested. I'll give you an example. My youngest brother is 18. He's partially disabled. He was born in June 2006. That year, soon after he was born, Israel destroyed the only power plant in Gaza, which is also located in my refugee camp. He has lived through a dozen Israeli military operations. Since he was born, he's 18 today, he has not seen a full day of electricity in his life. He grew up with drones, F-16s, bombing Gaza. He never left Gaza. He grew up with lack of electricity. The norm is to have 8 hours of electricity. So Israel recently decided to completely cut off fuel, water, internet, and electricity supplies to Gaza. The norm is to have 50-50 hours of electricity. So 8 hours of electricity on, then 8 hours of electricity off. That's the best case scenario. And he lived with that for how many years? 18 years. And no one talked about it. This is collective punishment. This is slow death again. He never left Gaza, as I said. The majority of Palestinians in Gaza need mental health support, and they do not have it. I remember when I was young, we would play all these games that would actually reflect the reality of our lives. So we would have, like, instead of hide and seek, we did hide and seek, but in a violent way. Israeli soldiers and Arabs, and then like Israel. As kids, we always wanted to be on the Israeli soldiers' side because we wanted to beat Arabs or Palestinians. So young people in Gaza cannot find jobs today. They cannot start families. Although we have a very highly educated population, 98.5% of the people of Gaza are literate. Although it's a sad situation, we do not want to be remembered as helpless victims or refugees. We are survivors and thrivers, and we live despite the occupation. There are thousands of graduates in Gaza who have master's degrees and BAs and even PhDs. Gaza has one of the highest PhD rates and percentage per capita in the world. But they cannot find jobs. So young people are leaving Gaza, and it's ironic because the majority of Palestinians leave to Greece through Turkey. This is the easiest way. I mean, it's deadly, but in terms of obtaining visas, it's the easiest way. One of them is my friend Jawad. I haven't heard back from him in 3 days. I know. I hope he crossed. So young people are leaving because they cannot find hope or a future in Gaza. It's ironic because just 6 years before my refugee camp became my refugee camp in 1948, 1,000 Greek refugees made it to this particular spot as refugees because Nazis invaded their island. And they stayed there for a year. There's the pictures of them, there's a priest and people getting married and people eating batikh, watermelon. And today, Palestinians are leaving to Greece. This is, a reminder for all of us that one day we might become refugees, because refugees never choose to become refugees. It's something imposed on them. Despite, the tragic reality of young people in Gaza, I want to highlight some success examples. As I said, the population is highly educated. We have thousands of people who work in the IT sector. We have some incubators that help people in Gaza connect with the outside world. I urge you to read We Are Not Numbers. There are hundreds of stories written by young people in Gaza about their life under siege. And I also urge you to check Gaza Sky Geeks and Gaza Gateway, where they train young people, especially in the IT sector, and connect them with companies outside, including companies in the Silicon Valley. I know a 16-year-old boy who ended up in the Silicon Valley. He was into video gaming. The cover of the book was designed by Malak Matar, who's an artist from Gaza. Now she's touring Hawaii, exhibiting her work. Also, I think just last week I saw this young rapper from Gaza. He speaks like a Brooklyn English. His name is MC Abdul. He was also touring, I think, the Bay Area. So despite the tragedies, people thrive and live above the occupation, despite the occupation, not under it.
So I want to take us out now to a little bit more of an international lens. You were just at the U.S.-Mexico border within the past day or two, and you were at the Canada border in this past 2 weeks that you've been here, and you've done a lot of study on borders and barriers and walls. And I'd be curious to hear more about your experiences at the border and how you saw them in the context of migration and limited movement. And before I hand you the microphone, I'm coming to the end of my questions, and I want to open it up to the community for what questions you have. And with this background of what Gaza is like, then we can move into questions about what's happening right now. But there are folks who have slips of paper that they're going to pass out, and if you have questions that you want to write down, go ahead and be thinking about them and get them to the folks who will bring them up to me. So please.
Borders for me mean fragmentation and isolation. I remember one day I went to the Jordan-Palestine borders my cousin was traveling back home to Bethlehem, and as a Palestinian I was not able to cross the border. Although my travel document says I can cross to the West Bank, but this is only on paper because I am from Gaza. So we sent him to the border and he made it. And I thought about the bridge. This is what we call it. So the West Bank and Jordan are connected by a bridge. The Israelis call it the Alimbi crossing. The Jordanians call it the Karama Dignity Crossing, and Palestinians and locals call it the bridge because it's the bridge, the only bridge. And I thought of the bridge, it could be like a place that connects people. So when we talk about connecting people, we talk about building bridges. But in this case, I thought of the bridge as concrete object that separates me from my family. Because of this particular bridge, I cannot be with my family, although there are other barriers too. I also thought of what Palestinian novelist Mourid al-Barghouthi in his novel I Saw Ramallah said, describing the bridge, because he was separated from his family for 30 years, from 1966 to 1996. He addressed the bridge and he said how a dark piece of wood would prevent entire generations from sipping coffee in homes that were theirs. So this is like physical, the physical understanding of borders, but also the surveillance. In Gaza, we joke that Israeli drones can tell whether we're cooking fresh meat or frozen meat for lunch. So it's a psychological feeling and state where you feel you're violated and watched 24/7, let alone the noise. So imagine if you live in a place like Gaza where you have drones 24/7 for 2 decades almost. Electricity is out. It's too hot and humid. We are also part of the world and we suffer from climate change. So people go upstairs. They sleep on the roof in the summer because it's too hot. They do not have electricity. And then they have these drones watching them and like waking them up basically, because it's hard to sleep when there is like this continuing sound of buzzing. I used to think that physical borders are harder to cross and navigate, and that maritime borders, because a lot of people in the West Bank and my cousins, when we like complain about life in Gaza, say, but you have the sea. You have, because Palestinians in the West Bank cannot access the Mediterranean, which is in some places 8 miles away from them. They cannot go to the Mediterranean. So they envy us because we have the sea. But our understanding of the sea is different. That's where fishermen get shot. That's where we cannot go beyond 3 nautical miles. That's where very much of the, fishery is not available for us. So I thought like maritime borders are easier to navigate, especially like I lived in Istanbul a couple of years, and I was able to take the ferry from the European side to the Asian side. In 15 minutes, I would cross from 2 continents. But then with people dying in the sea, Palestinian refugees dying in the sea, I realized that maritime borders are equally difficult and deadly. So seeing the US-Mexico borders, yes, seeing the US-Mexico borders and the US-Canada borders made me make comparisons between, so once I got to the US-Mexico borders, I remembered our own borders, the surveillance, high walls, the feeling of being like hungry and being stuck between 2 walls, control, checkpoints, fences. So it's like a representation of death. Although I lived in Gaza for 25 years, I've never been to the eastern borders of Gaza. That's like the Israeli borders. Because in my psyche and the collective experience of Palestinians in Gaza, if you go there, you get shot, you get killed. And this death machine is very automated. So you do not see like patrol units. I mean, at the US-Mexico borders, there are patrol units. But when it comes to Israel, everything is automated. It's like cameras, machine guns, even patrol units and jeeps. They no longer have soldiers. It's all about cameras and drones. And the US-Canada borders were very green. No physical borders. You literally crossed to other side of the street and you are in Canada. I also saw some families like meeting. Some of them were having barbecue and like some good chats. So there is a huge difference between this and that. But also at the US-Canada borders, I heard some stories of people who are racially profiled. So it's never ending, but again, there's no way we can compare this, like the US-Mexico borders with the US-Canada borders. It's a striking difference. And it's ironic because Israel in the past offered to help the US with expertise to build the wall. at the U.S.-Mexico borders, they have experience that they want to export to the U.S. The same as they offer to train some police departments, teaching them tactics used against Palestinians, police violence. So it's really important that we draw these parallels with other experiences and other struggles, and because all these multinational companies, and Elbit System is an Israeli security company that's also providing services at the U.S.-Mexico borders. That is also providing the Israeli Navy and Army with its expertise and service to build the wall in the West Bank, and the Israeli Navy to besiege Gaza.
Some of the questions coming in, interested in light of what's happened in the past week, first of all, have you been able to be in touch with your family? Do you know that they're safe? And to what extent, you've done a great job personalizing the people of Gaza, giving voice to the beauty and the inspiration, and to what extent might the average person of Gaza had any idea of what was happening or its implications? How are the citizens of Gaza trying to make sense of what's happened in this past week and what's about to happen?
So I was able to connect with my family. Starting from 2 days ago, it became increasingly difficult to get in touch with them because there is no internet, electricity services in very much all parts of Gaza. But from time to time, they can connect and have some power banks and access to the internet, but the majority of them don't. So they send me updates. They tell me we're still okay. We're still bombing is everywhere, okay? And it's very loud and it's crazy. This time, it's very destructive. It's 10 times the amount of bombs that were thrown in Gaza in 2014. So it's very destructive, and it's intentionally destructive. It's not it's very random, but it's also intentional. So it's very scary. My cousin was injured. He's okay. But the rest of my extended family are hopefully okay. So I have to check again because a lot of things are happening and there are multiple updates. On the first day, I recognized 4 people who were killed that I know personally, including a poet. His name is Omar Abu Shawish. He lost his life in Gaza. To be safe, the idea of being safe in Gaza is very vague because you do not have a say over your future or your destiny. So Israel decides whether you will live or not. We do not have shelters, so people cannot go anywhere. Currently, there are 260,000 Palestinians internally displaced in Gaza, because Israel has been bombing entire neighborhoods. A Rimal neighborhood, which is the most fancy neighborhood in Gaza, was leveled to the ground, including the school that I went to. Some buildings in the school were completely destroyed. In the past, Israel would target a residential building or a 4-story building or an apartment. So it was more precise. Now it's intentionally more destructive. They destroy the entire area, and people have nowhere to go. Some people go, the majority of people, if they have families elsewhere in Gaza, they go there. But then Israel bombs, other refugee camps. So they have to move. People are on the move. They're surrounded by borders from all directions. They cannot leave. And as I said, 260,000 Palestinians are in schools run by the UN, UNRWA schools. Israel also bombed these UNRWA schools. They killed 7 journalists who were wearing their press vests. They targeted them not by mistake, intentionally. They also killed today 4 medics. They targeted multiple ambulances, I think 8. So they're preventing people who are injured and dead from being transferred to hospitals. Yesterday, Israel leveled another neighborhood to the ground called Al-Karama. And they also targeted medics who tried to get there. They targeted ambulances. And these are war crimes. In many cases, they also targeted the streets to make sure that ambulances cannot get there, so people die. And this is all documented. I mean, I see it, like people on the ground are reporting. You can go to Twitter and Facebook and write Gaza instead of watching US mainstream media, and see what people on the ground with limited access to the internet share. I hope my family will be safe, but it's different psychological war when it's easier for me to be there than to watch them from outside, because I don't know what's going on, and I'm always like watching the news. I do not have like enough sleep, and I'm always worried, trying to reach out. If I read something like breaking news that there is bombing next to our house, I keep thinking until I contact them and someone tells me, no, we're okay, we're still okay. It was very close, it was scary. And with mass displacement, internal displacement, it's even deadlier for Palestinians, because if Israel targets a house where literally dozens of Palestinians from the same family are located, it's going to be a massacre. And we have seen entire families completely killed in Gaza. Dozens of families. Everyone in the family was killed. They're completely like removed from the civic records. So it's very scary, but we do not have a say over this. It's not something that, as people under occupation, something we chose. Not now, not in the past. We never chose occupation. It was imposed on us. The siege was imposed on us. Death was imposed on us. And we hope that the international community, although we're very disappointed, as always, someone will wake up and see us as humans, not numbers, and recognize our dignity and our right to self-determination and equal rights, and end this madness sooner than later.
What would you like to see the United States do to help do the work of both ending the madness, large scale, and ending the impending violence that both the violence both that has taken place and that is going to take place, has been promised to take place in this new iteration of war?
It's sad because there are bills in the House that advocate for the rights of Palestinians, and they're not political. It's about making sure that U.S. aid is not used to cage Palestinian children, or justice for Palestinian American Shireen Abu Akleh. There was a bill in the House, U.S. House, since 2017, introduced by Representative Betty McCollum, that calls for different versions of this bill, calls for making sure that U.S. aid is not used by Israel to imprison Palestinian children. It's been 6 years. A lot of people spoke to their representatives, Americans, NGOs, and so far we have some 30 members of Congress signing up to this bill. I mean, 10 years ago, this was not even possible. That's why we say there's some change. But this change is never enough, because to send $2 billion in military aid to Israel during this escalation, it took US Congress 24 hours to do that. So it was not even hard to convince them to do that. And this is the last thing the US should do, to send weapons, because these weapons are used to kill innocent people in Gaza. 260 children lost their lives. Almost 200 women also lost their lives. And entire families were killed, as I mentioned. I think the US should play a more constructive role. And I'm not talking politics here. I'm talking about at least implementing international law. Implement international law. There are many Palestinians who think international law is also unfair, but at least implement international law. And as Israeli Defense Minister described Palestinians in Gaza as human beasts or human animals, which is very humiliating and untrue. At least treat Palestinians in Gaza, if you do not want to treat them as humans, treat us as give us animal rights, and sorry to say that, treat us like animals. Give us, we do not have access to water. Animals do. It's sad, and sometimes I feel so much rage because it's a big injustice. It's multi-generational, and we feel that we are abandoned, and our life is less valuable than other lives. But at the same time, looking at the struggles of other people, we know for sure that one day we will have equal rights. This is for sure, because we look at the struggles of other people in Ireland, in South Africa, different sovereignty movements in the world, in Algeria and elsewhere in the world. We recognize that one day we will also have our day, our freedom. And these historical mistakes will be corrected. Again, we've been victims of these policies, and it's very suffocating to be a victim. But we do not want to be remembered as victims. As I said, Gaza has a long history. It has pagan history, Christian history, Muslim history, Jewish history. Many people do not know that up until 1948, there was a Jewish quarter in Gaza. And the graves of people, merchants who lived there in the Zaytun neighborhood, are still there. Gaza is one of the oldest cities in the world, with 3,500 years. It used to be a Greek philosophy school in Gaza, one of the oldest in the world. The people of Gaza also like chili and spices, because we are a port city, so a lot of these spices and chilies would come to Gaza through the Mediterranean to the rest of the Arab world. And as I said, we are proud of our history. I will just conclude with this story. These days, people harvest their olives. And in Gaza, when we harvest olive, we say, Salla bis-salib. The cross has materialized. And again, it has a very interesting story, because Gaza has a rich history. So Gaza has always been rebellious over the years. And when Alexander the Great tried to conquer Gaza, he failed twice. And he lost his leg. And in the third time, he was able to conquer Gaza. When the British tried to capture Gaza from the Ottomans, they failed twice. And there are thousands of graves of British soldiers in Gaza. We have 2 cemeteries called the British cemeteries. Ironically, they're very green. This is where people, go out to have some fun. They go to graves. Because this is probably one of, these are the 2 only green places in Gaza. And it's sad because also some indigenous people, Maori people from New Zealand, were brought to fight the Palestinians in Gaza. And their graves are there in the British cemetery. I'm telling you this because the people of Gaza are known to be rebellious and stubborn. So Gaza was the last Palestinian city to become Christian when Palestine became Christian. When Gaza was still pagan, a priest came to Gaza and he saw all these dry trees and plants, and he told people, listen, why don't you believe in Christianity? I'm going to pray to God and for the sky to rain, and if it rains, then you should believe in Christianity. So people told him, Yalla, go and pray. If it rains, we will believe in Christianity. So he went and he prayed and it rained. So people said, the cross has materialized, which means that the priest was right and true, and they converted to Christianity. And because it was mid-September and early October, this is the first time it rains in the fall in Palestine, people have always connected the olive harvest with that's the signal for them. When it rains for the first time in the fall, they say, Salla bis-salib, the cross has materialized, and they pick up their olives.
So you have there's so many questions, and I can't even begin to go all over the place. But several folks did comment on the education that you shared, and just impressed with the commitment to education, and the way in which education is esteemed. So I don't know if you want to say just a little bit more about the role of education in Gaza, and is there a reason why Gaza is one of the most highly educated places on earth, even when it's one of the most bombed places on earth?
So as I said, when in the natives of Gaza in 1948 were 100,000, and in 2-3 months the population of Gaza has tripled to 300,000. Those refugees who came to Gaza used to own land, so this was their source of income, capital and wealth. All of a sudden they had to shift professions. They worked, they did all types of jobs. And it's very critical for people to all of a sudden change their professions. So land no longer became the source of income. Wealth, education became the tool for these refugees who had nothing in Gaza to rebuild their lives. That's why Palestinian refugees made sure that their kids go to education. I remember how my dad, who was not able to get education because he was working in Israel, he made sure that we also go to school because he couldn't. I have 13 siblings, and this is very typical in Gaza. Every single one in my family went to school. My sister has 5 kids, and she has a master's degree in business administration, and she's also an engineer. I have sisters who have degrees in medical technology, education, journalism, English language. So education is very important for us. And I remember my dad had a land lot that he sold so that my sisters could go to school. 4 of my sisters went to school at the same time. So education is very important for us. And I think It's also important for us as Palestinians because we live under occupation, and an ignorant nation that is not aware of its history and surroundings cannot liberate itself. There is an African proverb says, until lions have their own historians, the history of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. So how will we win freedom if we do not have the education, the necessary education? This is our tool to become better socially, economically, politically, but also to be able to be the lawyers of our cause. Without having the knowledge, we cannot do that. And this is the only way to get this knowledge is education, and knowledge is power for us. We lost land. We do not have much of it. It's actually shrinking every day. But we have our brains, and they cannot occupy our brains.
You have, thank you. Thank you for sharing some of your story, some of your wisdom, some of your light. These are extremely dark days, dark times for Gaza, but darkness is not something foreign to you, unfortunately. You have reminded me that there is light in Gaza. That in fact there's a lot of light, there's a lot of beauty, there's a lot of steadfastness, there's a lot of persistence and resilience. Do you see the light in Gaza? Have you heard the light in Gaza? What can we do to reflect this light? And what can we do to limit the powers that would seek to further suppress this light? And this is a question for you. It's also a question for folks in the audience, because as we come to a close, I'm going to invite several of our partners to share a variety of ways in which we can take action even in this moment. But I want to give you the opportunity to say first, how can we, the international community, reflect your light and do what we can to allow it to grow?
I think it's very important to uplift Palestinian voices from Gaza, to make sure that Palestinians in Gaza are not isolated and forgotten. If you have a library, try to give schools access to your electronic books, for example. These are just like examples. Sponsor someone to finish their education. Connect with Palestinians in Gaza, listen to them. If you are an academic, at a university, make sure that you connect with Palestinian academics. I remember in 2008, Israel bombed one of the buildings in my university, and the central library was damaged. I also saw that the same library, which was fixed and maintained, was also damaged recently. If you can send, books to Gaza, if you are working in the IT sector, make sure that you connect with IT professionals in Gaza. We do not want aid. We can contribute to the world if Gaza is open to the rest of the world. We have the potential to do that. Just connect with Palestinians and give people a chance so that they thrive. As I said, we can contribute to the world. We have a lot of educated people. Being in California, I know a lot of people have criticisms of mega companies here. But if you have a chance to employ a Palestinian IT professional, in coding, in people who work with SEOs and Google content creation. We have plenty of them in Gaza. You can, help people by giving them a hand, but a hand that empowers them, not makes them dependent. It's a political question. It's not about aid, and we don't want aid. If you are a doctor, volunteer with Palestine Children Relief Fund and go on medical delegations to Gaza to help Palestinians there. A surgery with lack of access to health infrastructure would mean life for people there. Even like medical consultancy. I know some people in Gaza, they're trying to get an answer, like people who have medical issues. Just like if you are a teacher, speak to your neighbors and your family. Today we have almost 100 people here. If every one of you, besides buying the book, speak to their, the situation in the US Congress is very helpless and hopeless. But still, we should make noise because Malcolm X said early in life, I learned that I have to make some noise. And he gives the example of how his other siblings would be quiet and they never get cheese from their mom. But he was very noisy and he got the cheese. So he says, early in life, I learned that if you want to get something, you have to make some noise. So we will always make noise. We should not give up. We speak to our representatives. We speak to our neighbors and friends, because this is the way to change public opinion, which is changing slowly. 10 years ago, I was here in the Bay Area, and the landscape was different from today. There are a lot of people who work for change. We might not see it, but we should always make sure that we keep working for change for the future generations. It's like people who plant olive trees in Palestine at the age of 70 and 80. They're unlikely to harvest the olives of this olive tree, but they've planted for future generations. And this is what we're doing here.
We began with a moment of silence, and I'm just wondering if we can have a moment of silence again to let everything that we've heard sink in. What do you want to remember from what you've heard? Just in holding Gaza in the light and savoring this moment. Let us pause. And in giving thanks for the truth that we have heard from you, and in acknowledging that we have responsibility to do our part to make some noise, and in fact we have a great responsibility for great harm is being done by our country. I want to give just a few minutes for the World Without Walls partners who have actionable ways in which people can participate in this moment. To mitigate the violence, to stop U.S. from sending weapons and arms. And I know that American Friends Service Committee has a few ways of taking action. I know that Hassan has a few ways of taking action. I know that JVP has on their website a few ways of taking action. And I want to give Mecca a chance to share some of the work that they're doing. And I'm going to invite you to come forward so that the people on live stream can see your face when you're talking.
So, as I said earlier, go online, take action under afc.org. There are There is an online action you can take, writing to your representative. We have an ongoing campaign called Apartheid-Free Communities, and I want to invite everybody here to think about the communities you are members of and get them to take a pledge to become an apartheid-free community. You can find out more about it in the table outside. There are flyers you can pick up, and online, apartheid-free.org. This is a pledge to oppose all types of bigotry, racism, oppression, and apartheid everywhere, and to cut all of our ties to Israeli apartheid. I know there is a demonstration that is planned for very soon with the local coalition, the Palestine Action Network. Who can speak to that? Is there anybody here with the details?
And then Hassan and Deborah, could you come up front as well?
There will be an action on Saturday, but we are having a planning meeting tomorrow, so we haven't figured out the plan yet. But if you follow PAN, Palestine Action Network, on Facebook, that will update you once we post it there. So hope to see you in the streets.
Hi, I'm with the Middle East Children's Alliance, meccaforpeace.org, and we are not primarily an aid organization. We are a solidarity organization, but in moments of catastrophe like people in Gaza are facing right now, we do switch to focusing on aid. We have staff, volunteers, and partner organizations that all are part of the Gaza community, and that enables us to get aid to places that other bigger organizations can't. For instance, we are the only organization getting food and hygiene products and medicine to people who are not in shelters, who have fled their homes because their homes have been damaged or destroyed and have gone to other people's homes. But because of our connections in the communities, we can reach those people. So right now, we're focused on aid. Other times we support all sorts of community projects for children. It could be anything from a soccer team to psychological counseling and everything in between to improve children's lives there. And I know both food packets and hygiene packets are especially important in this moment as people are far from their homes and have no access to essentials.
Thank you. I really want to thank you, Yousef, for your touching and dignified account and for finding light in a nightmarish situation. So I thank you very much. Just like Yousef said, education is very important, and Americans need to be educated. Americans need to be educated. The mainstream media get their sources and propaganda from Israel. There's a lot of other information out there. I think it should be our job, in addition to pressuring elected officials and try to change policy, is to educate our fellow citizens. There is no excuse not to know. There are many websites, resources. Norcal Sabir has a website with resources. Middle East Children Alliance, if Americans knew, JVP. So we need to be the media. So you transfer all the accurate information you have, combat all the lies. There's a lot of lies right now about Gaza. So you need to combat all these lies and then tell the truth to Americans, and only then they'll be able to pressure the elected official. They will come after that, after the public is well educated. To me, that's one of the most important things we can do. I also want to take that opportunity to invite you all to a coming event the lecture by Israeli professor Ilan Pappé. Ilan Pappé is an Israeli historian, former professor of history at Haifa University. He's now professor at Exeter University in England and the chair of the Institute for Palestine Study in England. Ilan is an author of numerous books on the subject, including The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine, including The Biggest Prison on Earth, and many others. He was described by John Pilger, who is an Australian journalist, as Israel's bravest, most incisive, and most principled historian. So that event will be in UC Berkeley, October 19, this Thursday, the week from tomorrow at 7 p.m. in the law school. I have flyers with me here, could pick a flyer. There are also flyers outside. So hope to see you, as many of you as possible. Also invite your contact. It should be a very informative experience for everyone.
Hi, everyone. I'll be very brief. I just wanted to draw your attention to, there is going to be on Friday has been designated a global day for Palestine. It was apparently came out of Gaza itself. And all around the country, and that's one of the motivations for the demonstration that we're going to have on Saturday for the Palestine Action Network. And the reason we're not going to have it on Friday, because there's a lot of things happening in the Bay Area and in the South Bay. There's going to be a conference at UC Santa Cruz, which is already being targeted by the Zionists. So if you have any time or energy or know people who want to go down and attend the conference, it's a one-day conference on Friday and also help provide security. And then I think on Sunday there's going to be a demonstration in San Jose. But I just want to mention the Global Day. It's one of the targets is the media. And I think we do have to be very concerned about the lies that are coming out from the US media and the world, sort of the world capitalist media. Even further demonizing the Gazans, who are now, it's the same stuff that they put out about Saddam Hussein, they're putting out about the Palestinians. And so we need to be aware, we need to join in whatever protests that we can, and we need to tie the hands of the military war makers from this country, because that's our job.
There are a lot of ways to act. On the table, you'll find information about all of these things. You will also find a one-page front and back flyer, the 5 things you need to know about Gaza. It's a great way to share with folks in your community who may not know some of the key historical pieces that have led up to this moment. Yousef, thank you for sharing your light. All who have I need you to sit down for a minute. We have a responsibility. Having heard truth, knowing there are lies rampant, knowing the need is great, and knowing there are things we can do, I want to ask if you would be willing to share what you've heard tonight, to go to one of these websites, to do some advocacy, to offer some aid, to share the 5 things about Palestine. If you are willing to do any one of those things, and be honest, if you are willing to do at least one of those things, would you stand up? We are in this together. Thank you for shining your light, and we will do what we can to shine our light as well until the day when we live in a world without walls. Final thing I need to mention is that books are available. Books are $20. Yousef will be willing to sign them if you'd like. So look at the resources in the back and feel free to purchase a book to further educate yourself and your community. Actually, let me see. Actually, I think we do.